We're joined by Mike Florio, and you talk about the hopes that are coming from the city of Chicago. How much of those hopes, or how important is it? How important to those hopes do you think is it that the Bears lock up that 2 seed on Sunday?
I think you always want to have the highest possible seed. You never know how things are going to play out. And you earn that spot, you hold that spot. It gives you home field advantage. You get at least 2 home games in the postseason. That's the biggest difference between being number 2 and number 3. You're guaranteed 2 home games. And you're talking about January football. And if the 1 seed gets upset along the way, you're hosting the conference championship game as well. And look, hey, this is the home field advantage they want to give up by moving into a dome. So enjoy it while you have it, because January football in the elements, certain teams can rise up, certain teams can't, certain teams are built for it. And I would submit that the teams that have to play in it all the time are the most prepared to do it. So, we may see a little of it on Sunday when the Lions have to venture out into the cold, and maybe we'll see more of it as the rest of the postseason unfolds.
They want to give up the home field advantage for a dome in Indiana. No, I'm just teasing. Mike Florio, I wanted to ask you about some things going on around the league. Let's talk about the newest Dolphins headline that they're going to bring in Troy Aikman to help them with their general manager search. I was puzzled by it. Someone who covered the Dolphins for 3 seasons. They have Dan Marino in that building. What are they getting in bringing in Troy Aikman?
Well, they're getting the benefit of the various contacts that he has developed throughout the league in a position where he's been handling the biggest games every week for more than 20 years. And this is one of the realities of the league tolerating Tom Brady being an owner of the Raiders and also a broadcaster. Once you stretch the rubber band that far, lesser stretches don't bother people. Troy Aikman is now working for a team, and he's working for ESPN ostensibly to broadcast games involving any team. Now, it won't matter because they won't have any Dolphins games on ESPN the rest of the way, but I'd love to know when they started talking to him. I'd love to know what the planning was to announce this when they did. Has this been in the works for 6 weeks? Did they know when the Steelers and the Dolphins were getting ready to play that Troy Aikman was about to be on the payroll for the Dolphins? How, if at all, would that have impacted the Steelers' willingness to be as candid with Troy Aikman as they would have been? This is just basic right and wrong. Standards exist or they don't. And back to Tom Brady, when they don't bat an eye at Tom Brady owning the Raiders and also working for Fox and calling games every week, and it's no big deal, you're going to tolerate a lot of other stuff that isn't as big of a deal as that.
What does this mean for Mike McDaniel's status? This was Troy Aikman on Monday Night Football a couple weeks ago that was absolutely bashing the way he handled that end of game.
Oh, absolutely. Now, look, he's going to be picking the GM, or at least consulting for the selection of the GM. Who knows what kind of consulting he'll do after that. But it really was a weird, bizarre kind of a situation where, are you trying to win the game? Are you just trying to make the final score look better? Like, what's really going on here? And it was a strange sequence, but this is what happens when you pluck voices who are there to serve as liaison between the game and the fans and make them employees of teams. Things that were said are going to come up, and how does this affect this? How does that affect that? The whole thing really is strange. I don't think it's an accident. It was announced on a fairly slow NFL day, a New Year's Day, when the football watching world was focused on college football. This is one of those that they don't want to make too big of a deal about, because I think the more people think about it and talk about it, the stranger it seems.
Whether we're talking with Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk and NBC right now, Ruthie Polinsky, Rami Makloff, and for Mully and Haugh this morning, whether we're talking about the Dolphins or anywhere, the Giants have a head coach vacancy, and I'm sure there will be more once the season ends. Who are some of the head coaching candidates, hot names that you're hearing out there? Is it some retreads, or are there some new names that you're hearing come up in the cycle this year, Mike?
Well, look, there's always 4 potential avenues. 1, coordinators who have never coached before. 2, college coaches who may be available if there's interest. 3, former NFL head coaches, and 4, current head coaches that you would basically try to work a trade for. And last year when the Bears were looking, I I said on this station they should call the 49ers about Kyle Shanahan, and that created a big unexpected and unanticipated, but ultimately profitable for me mess because it drove engagement and clicks. And that's why we're here, right? They call it clickbait. Yes, yes. A worm on a hook is bait too. That's how it works. As long as you're being honest about what you're trying to get people to click, not some weird, crazy, made up duping someone to click. Anyway, I digress. The Giants are, I think, looking for someone with head coaching experience. They need someone on the offensive side of the ball, although they haven't narrowed that focus. I was told weeks ago they haven't ruled out the possibility of trying to trade for someone. They want to see who gets fired. We don't know who's going to get fired. That will dictate who's available. There was a report today from ESPN. Mike McCarthy is in the mix, Antonio Pearson. They want to interview them coming up. The weird thing is they already could have interviewed them. You can interview people who aren't attached to any team whenever you want. And there's a lingering question as to whether or not Joe Schoen is going to come back as the GM. I just wonder if, and I hadn't thought of this before, the delayed timetable for interviewing these coaches, have they not interviewed them yet because they're not sure that Schoen is going to be the person who's hiring the next coach?
How about, Mike, the legal issues and allegations going on in New England right now and how that could potentially affect what they're trying to do this postseason?
It really was a stunner. And then you had it boom, boom, one day after another, first with Stephon Diggs and then with Christian Barmore. They are just allegations, and that's the posture that the team has adopted here. These are allegations and allegations only. There is no reason for anybody to think that these players won't be available. The league issued a statement saying that both players are eligible to play. There will be a point at which, when formal felony charges are filed against Stephon Diggs, if the season is still going on, the league's going to have to decide whether or not to put him on paid leave. The league has broad discretion, and the league hasn't really done this enough times that there's a reliable way to discern based on precedent what they'll do moving forward. For now, though, it feels like they're going to let both guys play. They don't want to disrupt the competitive integrity of the postseason. But, it's funny, the teams they may be facing are all very concerned about whether or not, the right thing to do. Maybe the right thing to do is to put Stephon Diggs on paid leave, not because we're going to be playing him next weekend, but because it's the right thing to do. And anytime something like this comes up, you automatically see the various teams slip into the roles that their competitive interests would obviously dictate that they take. It's like politics. We all know which side is going to go which way on which issue. It's whichever way helps me.
Talking with Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk and NBC Sports here on Mully and Haugh. Rami Makloff and Ruthie Polinsky in for those guys this morning. I saw comments by former Bears head coach Matt Eberflus, now the defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, almost downplaying the importance of pass rushers. And it's funny that it comes after they traded Micah Parsons to start this season. And that caught Parsons' eye. Did it not, Mike?
Well, what Eberflus said is basically, and I'm paraphrasing, it's hard to have a great defense when you have an impactful pass rusher who gets traded right before the start of the season.
Sure.
And remember at the time, Jerry Jones, the owner of the team, said, we just need to worry about stopping the run. Well, you also need to stop the pass, and you also have one of the best defensive players in all of football on your team, and you've just traded him because you didn't want to pay him, and also you were frustrated because, he was playing chess with you contractually and winning. So Eberflus is in a weird spot because it's widely believed he's going to be fired. There's some chatter that maybe the Cowboys will try to hire Brian Flores away from the Vikings. His contract expires after the Week 18 game, so he becomes essentially a free agent. It feels like Eberflus is in trouble, and this is a way for Eberflus to basically say, hey, you know what? Don't blame me. Blame the guy that yanked Micah Parsons away from the roster 10 days before the first game that counts.
You brought up Brian Flores. I'm curious if you think his name has the lawsuit filed against the National Football League. Has that simmered at all, or would you say that he would potentially be a head coaching candidate this offseason? And, Mike, would you say that sort of the downfall of Tua has essentially helped the name of Brian Flores as he sort of looks to get another shot?
Last weekend, I talked to a wide variety of high-level people throughout the league, coaches and general managers, and I came to the conclusion that he definitely will be a candidate. The scheme alone is good enough to get him interviews. The question is, does everything else line up? And what kind of due diligence do the teams do? What questions do they have? how things went in Miami, because it didn't go well and it didn't end well. The lawsuit is a weird little wrinkle to all of this, because it shouldn't matter that he's got an active lawsuit against the NFL, the Dolphins, the Giants, the Broncos, and the Texans. That should never be considered as it relates to future employment decisions. But are we naive? Like, he's not going to be the next Giants head coach.
Right.
And they'll have 50 reasons. They'll have 500 reasons, if necessary, other than he sued us. But at the core, is any employer going to be thrilled when they have other viable options, and it's all very subjective, and we can go this way, we can go that way? Is anyone going to welcome into the building as the most important employee in the entire organization someone who has an active lawsuit against the team? It is wrong under federal law for it to be a factor, but I think we're all grown-ups here when we realize that the Giants aren't going to hire Brian Flores to be the head coach. I respected what he did at the time he did it. I thought he was giving up his entire coaching career. The Steelers did the courageous thing by making him a senior defensive assistant and linebackers coach in 2022. The Vikings made him defensive coordinator the next year. We'll see if someone takes the next step and makes him a head coach. But there are questions that would need to be resolved. The time in Miami, there have been, as I did this research, there's been some rumblings that maybe the Belichickian way doesn't mesh with Minnesota nice, and there may be some folks in the Vikings organization that aren't thrilled with the interpersonal skills of Brian Flores. So these are all things that would need to be resolved. But the scheme is good enough to get him in the mix, and there aren't a lot of no-brainer great candidates this year. He could come out of this cycle with another job.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk and NBC, our guest for a few more minutes here on Mully and Haugh, with Ruthie and Rami in for Mully and Haugh. Lamar Jackson came out yesterday and dismissed some of the reports about his leadership, his preparation, as just noise. Mike, from what you're hearing, is all that just noise, or are there real problems in Baltimore when it comes to their two-time MVP quarterback?
Well, let's think about the background here. The Baltimore Sun had a column last week from Mike Preston, and it was kind of strange because it was a column and it contained nuggets of reporting that weren't couched as reports and didn't come from some other report. It was just a strange kind of a posture for this news to be dropped about concerns the team has with conditioning, nutrition, staying up too late playing video games, falling asleep during meetings. That all dropped into the Mike Preston column, and the gist of it, the message was the Ravens should consider trading Lamar Jackson. So yesterday he said he doesn't fall asleep during meetings. Coach Harbaugh wouldn't let him do it. Although I was reminded of Jimmy Johnson's line from 30 plus years ago as it relates to Troy Aikman. Somebody fell asleep during a team meeting and the guy got cut, and they said, what would you do if Aikman fell asleep during a team meeting? And Jimmy Johnson said, I'd get him a pillow. So I don't know. I always thought there was a separate standard for the superstars. But regardless, I think based upon everything that I've read, the people I know, the people I've talked to, and just my reading of the tea leaves and understanding of the patterns that I've seen play out over the last 25 years, I think the Ravens would like someone to call them and make them an offer they can't refuse for Lamar Jackson. They're not going to initiate it. They're not going to shop the final 2 years of his contract. They don't want to create the impression they want to move on. And Jackson doesn't want to create the impression he wants to move on. But if the opportunity arises, and I don't think it will, but if it does, that's something that the Ravens would seriously consider. They got 2 years left after this. Franchise tag is virtually impossible for 2028. They need to work out a new contract, or this question is going to continue to linger. Have they reached the point where it's time for the two sides to move on?
One more question for you, Mike. Curious what happens if the Steelers lose this weekend. What's the future of Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers, for that matter?
Well, I think Rodgers and Tomlin are tied together. Rodgers earlier this week said, hey, and he almost came out and said, I'd like to come back for a second season, by comparing his experience in Green Bay with Matt LaFleur when he arrived in 2019 as head coach, how much better Rodgers was in the second year in the offense. Well, you draw the dots. He thinks he might be a lot better the second year in the offense in Pittsburgh. But first and foremost, Mike Tomlin has to be there before Aaron Rodgers would be a consideration. I don't think a new coach is going to want to keep Aaron Rodgers around. And Tomlin can do whatever he wants to do. And I think it's interesting that we're starting to pick up the smoke of Tomlin maybe going to TV? Because I look at it this way. If I'm an executive that wanted to hire Tomlin, I'm making the phone call the day after the fire Tomlin chants, following the 26-7 home loss to Buffalo, where they got embarrassed and it all just felt like it was falling apart. I'm making my play for Tomlin. I mean, for all we know, somebody has made their play for Tomlin. For all we know, there's already a deal in place for Tomlin to go work for one of the networks after this season ends. It's just odd to me that there's all of a sudden this smoke that's filtering upward that Tomlin may go to TV. And, it all comes down to whether or not they win or lose on Sunday night. That's why I think that's such a great game to end the season with. You've got questions about both coaches. You've got questions about both quarterbacks. You've got no safety net. The Saturday night game between the Seahawks and the 49ers, the winner's going to be the 1 seed. The loser's still in the playoffs. Sunday night, it's win or go home. And for the quarterback and the coach of the team that goes home, it maybe go home for good.